Nobody, not a single fan, viewer, or industry colleague, could have predicted the news that rippled through British media circles earlier this year. It wasn't a headline about another television shakeup, nor was it a dramatic on-screen moment. Instead, the shock came from something painfully private. Whispers that Annie Shephard, the calm, grounded, fiercely devoted wife of beloved presenter Ben Shephard, had allegedly reached her breaking point and told Ben she was considering walking away from their marriage. For millions who viewed them as the epitome of stability, warmth, and partnership, the very idea felt impossible. But behind every perfect television smile lies a life the cameras never capture. What happened inside the Shephard household would push one of Britain's most cherished presenters to the emotional brink. 1. The couple everyone admired. For decades, Ben Shephard has been a familiar, comforting presence in British homes. From GMTV to Good Morning Britain, from the electric tension of Tipping Point to the warmth of Ninja Warrior UK, Ben always projected the same qualities: reliability, humor, a steady hand, and an unmistakable kindness. But those who knew the Shephards understood something else. Annie was the anchor of that entire universe. They met young, long before fame, long before early mornings and grueling production schedules swallowed Ben's time. Theirs was a love that grew quietly, the sort you don't see splashed on magazine covers, but rooted in loyalty, patience, and the shared chaos of raising two sons. To many, their marriage was a rare example of normality in a world that often devours it. A grounded family, a gentle love, a partnership that survived fame rather than being shaped by it. But even the strongest foundations can crack if left unattended long enough. 2. The first signs of distance. The changes were subtle at first. Annie noticed Ben's schedule tightening again. More fill-ins, more live segments, more evening charity events. He was becoming, as he often admitted himself, a man who was always running late for something. It wasn't ambition, it was obligation. Producers loved him, viewers trusted him, and in an industry defined by unpredictability, reliability becomes its own trap. Ben kept saying yes, but that yes always came out of the time that once belonged to Annie. Their dinners became brief exchanges. Their weekends became logistical puzzles. Their quiet evenings, once their sacred form of reconnection, dissolved into a rhythm of exhaustion. Annie never blamed him, but she felt it. The man who used to share morning toast and late-night tea had become a guest moving through the house in half-sleep. And when emotional distance grows slowly, it often goes unnoticed until it is nearly irreversible. 3. Annie reaches her limit. Friends close to the family later whispered that Annie had been struggling for months. Not angry, not resentful, just tired. Tired of feeling like the last thing on a very long list. Tired of listening to Ben talk about everyone else's needs while quietly neglecting his own family's. Most of all, she was tired of being invisible in the life she helped him build. The breaking point reportedly came after a particularly grueling series of filming days that stretched past midnight, a week where Ben barely saw his sons and had not had a single meaningful conversation with Annie. That Friday evening, with the house finally quiet, Annie simply said the words she had rehearsed silently for weeks. "Ben, I can't keep doing this." He thought she meant the week. She meant the marriage. When she said she was considering leaving, Ben didn't understand at first. The words landed like a slow-motion shock, impossible and surreal. But Annie wasn't emotional. She wasn't shouting, and somehow that calmness made it worse. This was not a threat. This was a conclusion. 4. Ben's world collapses. The beloved presenter who always had the right words suddenly felt speechless. Ben Shephard, the man who guided contestants through tense finales, who navigated chaotic live interviews with poise, froze completely. He begged her to explain what he had missed, how he had allowed things to reach this point. And when she answered, she spoke with the soft devastation of someone who had reached the end of her emotional rope. She told him she no longer felt like his partner, but rather an observer in a life dominated by studios, call times, deadlines, and obligations. She told him she felt lonely, not in the dramatic sense, but in the quiet, hollow way that accumulates over years. Worst of all, she said, "I don't think you see me anymore, Ben." Those words broke him. Colleagues later reported that Ben arrived at the studio Monday morning visibly shaken, exhausted, distracted, and fragile in a way none had ever seen. He confided in only 2 trusted friends, admitting he feared he'd taken his marriage for granted. One said he looked like a man who had finally learned the cost of being everyone's favorite, except the person who mattered most. 5. The turning point. After days of soul-searching, Ben realized something profound. He had been giving the world the best of him, and giving Annie what was left. He canceled 2 charity commitments. He postponed a promotional appearance. He told producers he needed a few days at home, something he had never done. At first, the network resisted. Ben pushed back. For the first time in years, he chose home over obligation. But rebuilding trust isn't a single gesture. It's a painstaking series of choices made consistently, intentionally. Ben began with something simple. He listened, truly listened, not as a presenter, not as a problem solver, as a husband. Annie explained her exhaustion, her sense of being emotionally sidelined, her silent grieving for the marriage they used to have. Ben didn't defend himself, didn't rationalize, didn't list all the reasons he'd been busy. He just held her hand and said, "I'm sorry. I want to fix this. I want us." And he believed him, because this time he believed it too. 6. The quiet fight to save a marriage. They made small but symbolic changes. Ben carved out 2 evenings a week strictly for family, phones away, no exceptions. He shifted early call times when he could. He gave up certain weekend gigs. He became present again, truly present, not just physically, but emotionally. Slowly, Annie began to soften, not because of grand declarations, but because of everyday consistency. A shared breakfast, a walk along the river, watching their sons play football without Ben checking emails between goals. Their marriage had never needed glamour. It needed attention. And Ben, for the first time in years, was giving it fully. 7. The public remains unaware. Throughout this fragile period, the public had no idea. Ben continued smiling on screen. He laughed with contestants, joked with co-hosts, and carried the emotional weight in silence. But those closest to him said something shifted. He became more reflective, more grateful, more aware of the preciousness of the life waiting for him at home. Behind every cheerful broadcast, there was a man fighting quietly, desperately, to keep the love of his life. 8. The healing. Weeks turned into months. Nothing changed dramatically, but everything changed gradually. Annie later told friends she saw a different Ben, not a new man, but the man she married returning to her piece by piece. Their evenings were filled with conversation again. Their weekends regained their intimacy. Their sons felt the warmth spreading through the household again. The laughter, the silliness, the sense of home. One autumn evening, as they sat in the garden under soft fairy lights,